But our goal, and I think the goal of every single company in this space, should be to get the product quickly enough back in the marketplace so it sells within that season.
Hello, I'm John Jannarone, Editor-in-Chief of Exec Edge. Happy to be back here in Orlando, Florida for ICR Conference 2025. I've got a terrific guest, a really interesting business. This is ReturnPro. We have the co-founder and CEO, Sender Shamiss. Sender, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. Excited to talk to you.
Awesome. So, Sender, we were just talking in the green room about returns, and I had an example. I got a couple of shirts for Christmas that didn't fit. They're still on my kitchen counter. And I was saying to myself, is this return process pretty streamlined at big companies? And you said, actually, no, John. A lot of big companies actually need our help too. Can you explain that?
So I get this question a lot. I think that returns start with someone making a decision that they're not happy with the product that they're going to get. In a lot of cases, they're not necessarily reading the policy and it's not necessarily clear. So that's a big part of return. Looking at the policy online and making sure that it's clear and you know what you're going to return. On top of that, even if the policy is clear, most consumers are not really that savvy where they're scrolling through, terms of use to see what the policy is.
Yeah.
So as a site, as a D2C marketplace, you have to make sure it's very clear what the return policy is, almost as if you're in brick and mortar. A big sign on the way out that says, make sure you return it within this amount of time. You also have to create trust in the site. And in your brand, you have to make sure that you very clearly articulate what the terms of the return are. Some retailers started charging fees for returning product. I think Gap does it. Some of the other clothing retailers do it. It's really, really important to know that you want me to come into your store to return the product, and that's where I'm gonna get a return for free. But if I'm gonna ship it back to you using some sort of parcel carrier, or drop it off in a location that you don't like, you're going to charge me a bunch of money to do it. So, that's a big factor in returns. But, talking about your specific example, it's called bracketing. And bracketing means you're going to buy one size up, one size down, and somebody's going to give you something. You're just going to leave it on the shelf, and maybe keep one item and return the rest. And it's a big, big problem in returns.
Well, so can you tell me how ReturnPro gets involved and helps make the process easier? And maybe do you even get involved in explaining to the consumer how it works?
So there's three elements to returns. That's the way we see it from a vision perspective. The return starts on the pre-purchase. So before you even make a decision to buy, there has to be very, very clear explanation of what that return policy is. There also has to be some sizing mechanisms for things like clothing, fitment for things like furniture, tools and whatnot, electronics. You have to understand, or at least educate the consumer on the way out, what is the most prevalent, most expected item for them to buy. So let's say in a Levi's, you're, a size 30. And maybe in a different brand like a Wrangler, you're a size 32 for a particular SKU. There should be technology out there. I know we're developing, I know there's a bunch of other companies developing, that literally is cross-marketplace and tells you a widget on a mobile phone, a widget on a browser that tells you that this size on this brand is a different size on a different brand. And a lot of marketplaces do it internally, so they really try to help you by using sizing charts and whatnot, but that's not done enough. There's a whole element of pre-purchase, customer trust, and customer profiling and all that good stuff. The second part that we address is the post-purchase, and a lot of venture money has gone into that. That's a lot of the companies that you see out there are these post-purchase portals. There's probably 200 of them now. Unfortunately, there's just too many. And I think that VC dollars go into these SaaS businesses because they think it's low-hanging fruit. But in reality, these brands, they're not really interested in solving in a post-purchase portal. They're interested in the entire solution. How do you prevent the return? How do you deal with the return when it does occur, or save that customer? And then what's the physical handling of the return? And that's what we do. We do that entire chain.
Okay.
We do the pre, the post, and the physical handling. For what? To be able to bring the product back to life and then feed it primarily back to your marketplace. because we think you're going to recover much more than some liquidator or seller on a marketplace like eBay.
Yeah.
That's the whole goal here. The goal here is for you to resell that product, capture that secondary market customer, and maybe that secondary market customer on that purchase or future purchase becomes your primary customer.
That's interesting. So, just going back to this example, since we've got one at hand here, those shirts are still wrapped up. I just knew they're the wrong size. So presumably those will get sold to somebody else, you'd hope, right? So rather than liquidated?
So it depends on the category. In the shirt, from the shirt perspective, yes, if you return it in season. So in seasons, how long have they been sitting?
Just 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
But they're like basics,
What are they? Long sleeve or short?
Yeah, they're like polo shirts, They're like blue and green polo shirts.
Polo, there's a chance because we're going in the summer, but if somebody changes that model, those items are going to go into liquidation, unfortunately, and they're going to be sold off or destroyed, even worse, or landfilled. And if they're sold off at like 10, 15 cents on a dollar, maybe you'll see them on secondary market sites, maybe in different countries. But our goal, and I think the goal of every single company in this space, should be to get the product quickly enough back in the marketplace so it sells within that season.
I just want to go back to the three phases you were talking about. Is that something that differentiates you from some of the competition out there, that you're involved in all three steps as you laid out?
So from a business perspective, yes, very much so. There are some companies that play on the post-purchase. There are some companies that do the physical logistics piece of it. There's multiple technologies on the post-purchase. So there's things like contract management between vendors and retailers. There's the portals themselves, which you know of. There's insurance companies. There's drop-off locations. That's all post. The physical handling, there's refurbishers, transportation companies as big as UPS and FedEx and DHL that move the product around. There's very niche refurbishers in there. And then there's re-commerce companies that specialize in reselling returns, usually in a liquidation basis or some sort of wholesale basis. There's almost no pre-purchase companies. We're not a company that's out there to profit from fees. I think it's a very important part of our business, and we evangelize this internally. It's a big part of our vision. We're here to look at your brand and say, what can we do to save that bottom line? So education is a big part of it. Returns are about $890 billion.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a massive number. Out of the 5.23 trillion US GDP, that number is about 16.9% of everything sold. So think about it like this. If we don't return that product, we're degrading the brand. How many brands actually have a 16.9% net margin? Not many. I mean, so for every
retail, yeah.
Exactly. Every point that we recover goes back to the bottom line.
Yeah.
So working with that brand and figuring out what's the whole process. How do we do a discovery that looks at your entire returns ecosystem? What's a brand? A brand sells usually some sort of direct to consumer. Usually, most brands don't have a massive direct to consumer. Some can. Usually they have a huge first-party sales to like big box or whatever on the wholesale side, and some direct-to-consumer third-party marketplaces. That's a big part of the business, right? You have these portals that maybe address the direct-to-consumer side. You have specialized companies that are addressing the first-party. You have no companies that address third-party, and it doesn't help the brand because the brand sells on all three places. So you need to meet them where they are, and you need to solve the problem. And you say, look, if these are 100% of your returns and they represent, some $1 million, and that ends up in $1.6 million worth of returns, and your margin is maybe, 800,000. How much, and I'm using a very small example, most of our customers are massive, and now we're branching to the SMB market, but I think that using that small example, every percentage point that I save, that I can recover, that I could get a 70-80% or bring back to life and push back into your marketplace, literally goes directly to your margin. And that's the amazing part.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Can we talk about 2025? Do you expect anything different this year? And by the way, before actually we get to that, when everyone was locked up at home during COVID, what was going on with returns then? Were returns higher? I mean, you'd think so because, I don't know, you're at home and you got nothing else to do. You might not like it. I'll just swap it for something else. Was that an opportunity for you guys?
So I think e-commerce as a whole kind of shifted. So retail shifted. A lot of it went towards e-commerce. It was just easier. People felt safer. Although from my perspective, I think it's silly. Somebody touching the box in a retail environment and touching it in the fulfillment center is the same. But I think people just felt more comfortable shopping online, and there was a mass shift, and a lot of the retail stores were just closed.
Right.
So that return rate, the reason why it keeps going up year over year, it so substantially is because as consumers shift to e-commerce spending, the e-commerce return rate can be as high as 40%. We are in a brick and mortar typical environment, it's about maybe between 6 and 10%.
That's
so
interesting.
Depending on the category, right?
40, that's unbelievable.
It's insane. It's absolutely insane.
Well, I forgot to ask, what categories do you work in? All kinds of stuff? It could be apparel, electronics, toys, all kinds of things?
Walmart's our biggest customer.
Okay.
We're happy we love Walmart. And I think that a big part of this is servicing their categories, 259 categories from we view a category. We have 8 facilities in the United States, 2 in Canada, 2 in Mexico, and 1 in Southeast Asia. It's an economy of scale, right? To be able to handle 259 categories, we refurbish over 1 million computers, over 1 million televisions, apparel, from fishing rods to furniture. We do home goods, hard goods, tools, everything. And for us to become good at all these things, we have to find the economies of scale that work, because the typical category has about a $30. Apparel is obviously cheaper, but costs approximately $30 to touch a $100 item. But it also costs $30 to touch a $10 item. So it's around the same $30. Yeah. The problem is with the $30 is that if it's a $10 item, you're underwater, depending on where you are geographically. So for us, it's important to have that footprint on the supply chain side, in the same way that it's important to have the footprint on the technology side, and then obviously on the e-commerce side. That's what we work with, right? That's the idea. That's why we've become what we've become, and that's why so many companies are gravitating towards us.
Great. Now, Sender, last question. What are you most excited about in 2025? In particular, what efforts are you making to grow the business further?
So we have a massive 3P launch for third-party marketplaces where we're going to handle returns for 3P. So that's really exciting for us. A bunch of new tech that's out there, amazing new supply chain, and the tech allows us to put the product directly into our brand's infrastructure, whether it's brick and mortar or e-commerce sites. We're super excited about that. We never wanted to be in the e-commerce business. We want the brand to do it. We do it as a necessity, and we're really good at it. Our recoveries are amazing, but again, they're never going to be as good. So for 2025, we're just excited about expanding our brand, educating, the rest of the world about returns, and kind of hoping to get the number down while dealing with what has to occur, the inevitable return itself.
Perfect. All right, Sender, this has been terrific. We're going to leave it there. This has been Sender Shamiss, who's the co-founder and CEO of ReturnPro. I'm John Jannarone, Editor-in-Chief of Exec Edge, here from the ICR Conference in Orlando, Florida.